artboard, that's fine. So there's my line drawing. Right? We can do a little bit of transform. I'm not overly worried about scale right now because we're not dealing with scale. But there's my plan. Right? And I can deselect here. And so it's probably really hard for you guys to see everything. Right? The lines are in fact there. Let me take a second. Oh, come on. And let me adjust the weight here. Something like that. So we get the line drawing. There it is. Right? And then I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Place, and I'll bring in that background, which is right here. Press Control minus. And let me make sure that it's on its own layer below. That. And then we need to spend a little bit of time to do some adjustments here to make sure that this fits. Something like that. And then we have the overlay. And in reality, I would spend a little bit more time getting that together. But we've got the overlay of the shaded version with the line version over the top. Right? So I'm using the two together to create this plan view. Okay? So to me, this is a reasonable interpretation, reasonably fast. But if we want to take this a step further and we really want to study how this works, right, on our site, we'll jump back. And this is, again, I'm starting to go a little bit more technical here. And instead of hiding, right, all those upper objects, I'm going to apply a see-through material to all those objects. So we'll go ahead and type show, which brings back all of these, right? And I'm going to select all of these objects like that, right down to where, oh, looks like I didn't quite get them all. There we go. So I got all of those objects there. Okay. These are going to have a see-through material applied. So instead of having my override on, we'll uncheck override materials for now, and I'm going to apply the see-through to these particular materials. So I'll go to materials, I'll find my see-through, which is right here. Maybe. It's not loaded. Let me go ahead and load it. All right, good. That's loaded. Now, I want to apply it to everything except the glass because I still want the glass to be transparent. So I'm going to turn off the glass layers. So there's window glass there. There's the glass railing there. And where else did I have? I thought I had one other piece of glass somewhere. Oh, I guess that's it. OK, so I have those two off. Now I can go back to materials, go to see-through. And we'll apply material to selection. So now all of those have the see-through material applied. Right? So I can click off. Now I need to select the glass. So we'll select objects here. And we'll select the window glass here. Select objects. Oh, I have to turn them back on. Select objects. Objects. All right, so I've got those. And so what I'm concerned about is not these, but the lower set. So we'll deselect, excuse me, not the lower set, the upper set. So we'll deselect all of those. So I have just this part selected. And I need a basic transparent material. So let me go to Create Material, Standard. We'll call this Transparent. And just change the transparency to white. Means it's 100% transparent. And then I'll apply that transparent material to everything. Apply material to selection. So it's applied to all of them. Perfect. Okay, so now that's done, and if we're looking down on this object, everything that's above is going to be that see-through, so it's still going to cast shadows. Everything that's below right now is not a default material anymore. It's actual materials. So if I want those to render out as white, I'm going to have to override the materials that are on that as well. So it takes a little bit more than just the section cut. So let me go ahead and select everything below there, except for the glass and the window glass here. Right? So I have just that selected. I'm going to go to my materials, and I'm going to create another basic material, standard, and we'll just call this one white. And all I'm going to do is change the color to be white. Say OK. And I'll apply white to everything. Okay, so now white's been applied to that. But I do have to come back once again to the glass. Right? And I could apply white to the glass, but I want the sun to shine through the glass. So we'll turn those both back on, and we'll select them. And we'll select them. Right? And I'm going to make these transparent. So let me just deselect the top set. And I could have done these all at once. Right? And we'll go to my materials, and we'll go to transparent. And we'll apply material to selection. Perfect. And then we'll come back to the plan view. And let me hide that clipping plane, and let me hide that big plane. So I'm back to here. And then I'm going to go to, hold on one second. I just want to make sure. All right, good. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to render. Oh, let me check to make sure that this view is still the same and I haven't zoomed in or out. Good. And then we'll go ahead and render. And this time we're going to have more accurate sunlight. Okay? Now the problem was I turned the sun off when I did this. And herein lies one of the biggest challenges with doing these kinds of clay renderings is if you turn the sun back on, the sun's going to be really, really bright against this white background. And so what I've done to improve what this looks like is I've actually gone and created another sun, or I will create another sun, but I'm going to use a basic directional light instead of the sun. So let me go ahead and turn the sun on for a second. Right? And to illustrate this, if I turn the sun on and we do a render, go ahead and take a look and see how it looks. See how it's really bright? If I want to expose this better, right, I'm going to have to adjust the physical sun properties a lot more. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a look at my sun. There's my directional light. I'll go to properties and I'll go to modify light. So I'll modify the sun. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these two values, the 128.2 and the 17.1, and I'm going to write them down somewhere. And of course I need a pen to write them down, right? Okay, because those two values will allow me to mimic what the sun is. Right? So we'll go ahead, and I just canceled out of it. I didn't end up changing the sun. We'll go back to my layers, and again, we're going into the more advanced section of this. And I'm going to go ahead, go to layers. We'll turn back off the sun, and let me go into my render view here, right there. And I'm going to create a new directional light. But in order to do that, I really need a line that I can use as a guide. So let me go ahead and create a line. There it is. There's my line. It's going right along the y-axis right now. And so then I'll start by typing rotate. This isn't 3D rotate. It's just a basic rotate. And the first rotation is going to be this first number, 128.2. right, which rotates, it's actually negative 128.2, sorry, because we're rotating to the south. There it is. Right, now I need to rotate 3D. Oh, I should have done that first because it's on axis. We'll rotate 3D first up by my 17.1 degrees, negative 17.1. There it is. And then we'll rotate by negative 128.2. And all that's doing is giving me the vector of my sunlight. Right? So now when I go to the basic directional light here, I can just snap to that line. So there, and I have a directional light that exactly matches my sun. Right? But it's much less intense. So instead of messing with the sun settings and whatever, I can use this to my advantage. Okay? So there it is. So let me go ahead and jump back to my plan view here. And I can actually, at this point, so we can see this a little bit better, I can ST clear all views. And we're looking down on our object. But the upper half of this all has that see-through material applied. So I can go ahead and render at this point. And I should get much better shadow results out of this render. I should be getting better results than this, but I'll have to go back and double check what is wrong in the settings. Let me go ahead and open my options and reload my clay render. All right, well, I'll have to play around with that a little bit more. So the other thing that is valuable when you start to get these renderings and you want to get them to line up is to have actually what the rectangle of the view is. And so there's a way of doing that, and I have to do a write-up that explains how to do this. Again, advanced technique here. But if I am in Plan 1 view and I go to Show Camera, so I go to Set Camera and then Show Camera, there, and I go and look at it in this render view, we see that I have a camera. And the reason it's so far away is because it's a parallel projection, right? But I will have, as I get close to, let's switch to wireframe for just a second. As I get close to my object, we have kind of a rectangle. See that rectangle and how it intersects my object? That rectangle represents, right, the size of my viewport. So I can use that to my advantage in that I can draw just a standard rectangle. And let me snap to points instead of the rest of these. Go from there to there. Right? There's that rectangle. It's a quarter the size right now. So if I scale by 2, oops, I need a point here. It'll be the full size of my rectangle. Right? So this, let me go ahead and move it vertically so it's above everything else. About like that. This is my view. This is what I'm looking at. So if I have that active when I do the Make 2D, it's going to give me the actual border, which makes dropping the images in really, really easy. Okay? So let's go back to that front view here. It's still showing. So if I go to Make 2D, and actually let me jump back for just a second. I want to go to my section tools, ST View. And 0, 1 is my view. There it is. I want to make the 2D of this view. So let me go to Make 2D. All there. Now, in this instance, I'm going to check the box for Maintain Source Layers. And I haven't done that previously, But sometimes when you have a complex object and you want to be able to separate out line weights, it's useful to do this. So I'm going to maintain the source layers this time, and I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay, now it's done. Let me go back into my top view. So let's do it over here. There it is. Right, I said all, so it made a second copy. This is the one that matters right there. And it so conveniently didn't export the rectangle that it was supposed to. So this is what happens when you do it right first time, and of course doesn't work the way you want it to. Anyway, so I don't have the rectangle, but in this view, let me move this out here. Right, it maintained the source layers. Right, so you see like these curves are all on their existing chair layer, which means that when you export it, right, into AutoCAD or you start to assign line weights, you can assign by layer rather than just these are all the invisible objects, these are all the hidden objects. So let me take this set right there, and let me go ahead and while I'm here, I'm going to trim these off before I get too far. Like that. Let me export these. Okay. Okay, so that's done. Now, in Illustrator, right, instead of having this, I can go to File and then Place. Let me bring in, actually, let me bring in this one. Okay, and let me put it, oh, how convenient. When it came into Illustrator, it lost the layers. You gotta love Illustrator. Let's bring it into AutoCAD instead. And open. All right, so this one's going to have layers. There are all the layers for me. Okay, and the nice thing here is that I can go through and I can assign line weights to these layers. And so a lot of the lines that come out of Rhino are black. We need to convert those to white, so I can go through and convert these to white. But I can assign all the individual line weights, and then I can end up with a drawing that looks pretty reasonable. Okay, so I'm not going to keep you going for too much longer. I want you to play around with this and try to get a plan view. Obviously, the plan view is less important than the good quality renderings. So once you get your rendering going, then work on the plan view. Right? But I at least want to show you kind of the workflow of getting the plans out so that you have legitimate, good quality AutoCAD output. Okay? Are there any questions? No? I'll try to sort out what happened in my rendering and why the shadow didn't show up correctly. And then I'll finish these and post some examples of how they look once the line weights and everything are all correctly applied. Okay? Okay, so we're going to get started with exercise 228. There's only 4 class days left, and then the final. So there's not a lot of time left. And if you were in the first class, you know I said the exact same thing, but there isn't. So the more you do now, the better. It's time to really get things figured out. You'll see more and more signs on the computer saying, rendering, please don't touch me, right? Nothing wrong with that. Usually people are very respectful of that, and hopefully that will pay off in the long run for you guys as well. So today presents kind of an interesting lecture. I want to show you, much like we did last class, I want to show you how to get good quality line drawings out of your models. And so while it's not required for the final, next year it probably will be required for the final, but for you guys it's not required. I still think it's important that you kind of learn the techniques. It's also something that I've never actually done in front of anybody before. So it's kind of a trial run, so to speak. So things might not go exactly as I want them to, but it is what it is. It's kind of a good timing because it's really an assembly of a lot of the stuff that we've covered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into kind of the bare minimum that you do, and then I'll do a bunch of extra stuff for people that are interested in watching me do a bunch of extra stuff that I think will enhance it quite a bit. The extra stuff will be distinctly separate. I'll tell you this is going into the extra stuff, but I think it will help people a lot if you kind of internalize that, and maybe if you don't get there this semester, down the road you'll go back and watch the second half of this and say, oh yeah, I can do these other things with it as well. So we're going to start by creating basically the plan view that we want, and we're going to use the same section tools command that we used to create the section view, only we're going to do it in the plan view. So it's essentially using the same tools that you already know about. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a really large plane to intersect my geometry, much like we did with the section before. This time it's just going to be a rectangular plane that's bigger than all of my geometry. And if I select that plane, we can then look at it kind of in the side view. So there it is, right? And in an ideal world, I'd want it 4 feet above my floor. So I can move, and I can move this up by 4 feet because it happens to be right at 0, 0. And that would be my first floor, where I'd be cutting for my first floor. Now, given the way that this building is kind of oriented, I think I'm actually going to move it up to 4 feet above this floor, and maybe not quite 4 feet, because I think I can cut through and get this floor, the stairs, and the lower floor all in one view. So I'm kind of interpreting a little bit. It's not a traditional view. So let me go ahead and move up. And let's see. So that's right. 4 feet above this floor would be right at that ceiling. So I really think I need to go down a little bit. So let me move it down by, I don't know, 6 inches. So I'm cheating just a little bit there to get this plane there. And actually, if we look carefully, see how it's coplanar with that one stair? I don't want to cut that stair, so I'm going to move it slightly more. So we'll move it to right about there. I do have some furniture in these scenes. I threw a little bit of furniture in just so that that would be a little added depth to this. So there it is. It's distinctly below that. It's cutting through my building right there. If we look at it in that perspective view, we can kind of get a sense for where it's chopping through my building. Okay? So I'm going to use that as my large plane for my section tools. Okay? So just like we've done before, I'll go to section tools and type create, or stcreate is the command line prompt for it. Here we have options. And so you're saying, well, wait a minute, do I want the x or the y axis? Where it matters is actually in these side views, because I'm going to be creating the section in the side view. So the x-axis is fine. We are going to leave the name. We're going to make sure that it's in solid mode, right, surfaces. And I'll go ahead and hit enter to accept the options. Now when I move right into one of these side views, it can be a little hard to see. Right? If I'm in the traditional rendered perspective, or if I'm in the top view, I'm going to see the section going right in a traditional manner for a normal section. But if I move into the front view or the right side view, I'm going to get the section right pointing down, which is exactly what I want it to be. So, oh wait, hold on one second. When I did stcreate, I had already selected the plane. I didn't want that, so let's do it one more time. stcreate, select objects. I actually don't want the plane. I want everything else but the plane. There we go. I'll go ahead and hit enter. The options are all fine, so I'll hit enter again. And then I'm going to place the section. And again, I want it pointing straight down, and we'll go ahead and snap to one of the corners of this big plane. So there it is. And I'll go ahead and hit enter when I'm done. And so that then builds right my first section, which is section 0, 0. Now, for you guys, you may end up using the geometry where you already have a section. It doesn't really matter what the name of the section is. For me, it's section 0, 0. And so that's OK. So let's go ahead and look at the top view here for a second. And we'll zoom in. Right? And let me go ahead and look at it in shaded mode. So we're looking kind of down on our object here, and deselect everything. Then I'm going to go to Section Tools, View Section. And I'll pick a list, and we'll say section 0, 0. And I want to see this in the top view. And so there it is, and I'm looking at what I've cut through. And my plane, right, is still visible. So I need to zoom out a little bit and get rid of that plane. So let me select it, and I'll just press hide for right now, and then we can zoom in, and we should see my object. Now I think it filled in my object, and we might need to view this in the side view here as well. So let me go ahead in render view here. We'll type stview, and we'll view 0, 0. And we want to see it in render 0, 1. There. And so it created some objects for me that I really ultimately need to get rid of. So let's see here. It locked them, so I need to unlock them. And the reason that it did this is when it cut through, remember I said solids, or I said surfaces, so anything that was contained in an object, it made a surface. I need to get rid of some of the surfaces, right? So that would be one. And now when I'm looking down on my object, okay, I'm seeing my actual pieces of my object. Notice that it cut through the contour there as well, right? Because that's where it intersected the terrain as we go through. Okay, so I have this set up. And now that I have it set up, I want to set a view that's a named saved view that I can come back to. And I know I have the view top, but my zoom level, and ultimately when I do a few of the clay renderings and stuff, I'm going to want to be able to come back to this particular view. So I'll zoom in to the extent that I want to see this, right? So we'll pick something about like this. And I'm going to go ahead and go to this little triangle, and I'll go to Set View, Named Views. And I'm going to save this view, and we'll call it Plan 0, 1. And I'll go ahead and say OK. So now I have the plan view showing, right? And because the view is active, if I typed Make 2D, right, and I selected everything, and I hit Enter, the default options are all fine for here. I can say Show Hidden Lines, and I'll go ahead and say OK. And this will make the first of my line drawing. Looks like something was locked here, and I didn't get all of it selected. Hold on a second. Make 2D. Let me back up and undo that last make to do. Make 2D. Okay. Let me zoom out. Remember, it makes it over here, right? There's my plan view, right? And I'm going to go ahead and move this over. And obviously, it's including more than. It's including this big circle for the water, etc. But I have my plan view. And notice that it does include my chairs, right? All of my windows, right? And the hidden lines are that whitish color. Okay? I can go ahead and I can select these, and I can go to File, Export Selected. And just like we've done before, I could save this as an AutoCAD file. And let me save it into my flash drive. Hold on a second. This is 228. And I'll go ahead and click Save. And I'll say OK. So that gives me the basic line drawing that represents this sectional cut. Okay? Now, if we go back and we look at, let me go to Set View, Named Views, we'll go to Plan View, there it is. If I come back to this Plan 1, it would be nice to have kind of a rendered backdrop for this. And so when I'm doing this, again, this is a permanent operation, right? I can do one of two things. There's an easy road and there's a hard road, right? The easy road is that I'm just going to override my materials, right, which we've done before. I'll go to Options. I'll go to Global Switches, check for Override Materials, and my override color I'm going to make white. I'll go ahead and say OK, which is basically overriding all my materials. I'm going to find the sun, and I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to load, under my V-Ray options, my basic VisOpt for clay renderings, which is on my flash drive. It's downloadable from your from the course website if you don't have it already. You go to Resources, into my VisOps, and I'm going to pick the clay render. There it is. So that'll reset all the clay render settings for me. All right, let's just make sure that my override is set to white. Okay, I'm making sure that the sun is off. Now, when I go to render, remember V-Ray doesn't recognize the fact that I have that section tools cut. Okay, so what I need to do is we'll look at this in the side view here, right? And I'm going to do a split using that large plane. So let me unhide, or is it show? Show. I'm going to use that big large plane to do a split of my geometry. So let's see here. Let me zoom out. There it is. Should be. That's a clipping plane. Hold on. There. This is the one that I want. All right. And I'm going to do a split. So we'll type split. Select objects to split. It's going to be all of that, except for that. I'll hit enter. Select my cutting object. It's going to be this. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And it's going to go through and do its split. All right, so this is exactly like I did with the section. All right, so now I'll be able to come in here in the side view, and I'll select everything above. Looks like it failed to split a couple things, so if we zoom in here, it's probably the blocks that are the windows, these guys. So since it failed to split those, I'm going to explode those blocks. So let me go ahead and select them. And I think I have one more right here. There. I'm going to type explode, and then I'm going to split those with my surface. All right, and let's see how I did here. All right, so I'm able to get everything, right? The lights, again, don't really matter. So I have all of that, right? And so the easy route is to just type hide once those are selected, and it makes that part of it disappear. Okay? And this isn't accurate for daylight settings, but it will give me a pretty good quality rendering. Let's see what else we have here. Let me hide this as well. There we go. So we're back to this view, right? And from here, as long as let me just double check my view. Let me go to set view, plan, and then when I render, one quick thing here, sorry. We go to options. I want the view to match, so let me go to output. I'm going to click on this get view aspect, and then I'll lock it, which just means that the view is going to match the current window size, the current viewport. And then let me render it again. And since this is basic settings, it makes it really easy to do. All right, so it rendered out for me, which gives me a basic kind of black and white view of what this looks like, a little bit of tone, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll save this view. And let me go to 228. This is plan background. And I'll go ahead and click save. And so now I have that background. And we'll then apply that together in another program after the fact. Okay? So I have that. It's not the most accurate, but it's a good amount of tone. I'm going to go ahead and throw these both into Illustrator so that you can see them in Illustrator. Again, which program you choose to go into is a matter of preference. It makes no difference to me what you're throwing them into, whether you're throwing them into AutoCAD, you're bringing them back into Rhino. It really doesn't matter. Let me go ahead and go to File, Open, and I'm going to bring this in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this today. but I want at least to bring these together so you can see them once they're together. And let's open up 136, 228, and there's my line drawing, my AutoCAD drawing, right? And so this is where we've got a little bit of issues because we've got scaling issues. We'll go ahead and just scale it to fit the artboard. That's fine. And it would be really nice. Make all of these black. You can hopefully see it. Actually, you know what? I need to do an edit of this in AutoCAD first because I have too much extra stuff. All right, so it's here. It's just gigantic. All right, so I really don't need a lot of this extra stuff. So let me go ahead, and I'm just going to draw a little rectangle around this. And I'll use trim. And I'm going to get rid of this extra stuff that goes around it. And so now I have just this piece, which is what I was after in the first place. And then we can go ahead and save this. And I'm going to reopen it in here. Let me do quick document setup here. Actually, let me go new. It would be so nice if it worked for me here. Come on. All right. So let me go ahead and go to place. Drop this in. Oh, how nice, right? These are cross-compatibility issues. Never opened something in AutoCAD 2015, right? So let's go back a few years. And let's try that again. All right, so we'll go ahead and scale to fit the